Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off right at the start. We are not doing the polite diplomatic dance today.
No.
Usually when we talk about Japanese politics, it's all very, well, it's procedural. It's consensus building, slow-moving bureaucracy, the famous revolving door of prime ministers.
Right, where you blink and there's a new guy who looks exactly like the old guy.
Exactly. It's usually about, pension reform or agricultural tariffs. But something happened on February 8th, 2026 that, well, it shattered that polite veneer. We aren't looking at a shift in policy anymore.
Yeah.
We're looking at a shift in reality.
It wasn't just an election, it was a demolition. And frankly, if you're still looking at this through the lens of traditional Japanese politics, you are missing the signal entirely.
Exactly. We're talking about the landslide victory of the LDP under Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The Liberal Democratic Party secured 316 seats.
316.
Out of 465 in the lower house, that is a supermajority. I mean, we are talking about numbers we haven't seen in the post-war era.
At all.
Her approval ratings are hovering somewhere between 63 and 83%, depending on who you ask, which for a Japanese prime minister is practically stratospheric.
Oh, absolutely. They're usually fighting to stay above 30.
Right.
And that number is terrifying if you were sitting in Beijing. It's terrifying because it removes the one thing China has always counted on when it comes to Japan.
Indecision.
Indecision. Gridlock.
Right. And that's what we really need to unpack, because the institutional take, the one you're going to see in the mainstream papers, the Nikki, the Asahi, is that this is a victory of personality.
Mm-hmm.
Takaichi is the first female prime minister. She's got a very distinct vibe. She's got that rock and roll drummer.
Which she leans into, by the way.
Oh, she absolutely leans into it. And let's be honest, she got a massive, massive endorsement from Donald Trump, who called her a delight.
Right.
So the conventional wisdom says this is a popularity contest. It's a celebrity moment. It's a recalibration of the post-war order, sure, but it's still politics. It's speeches and handshakes.
And that is exactly where the conventional wisdom is going to get people killed. This isn't politics. This is a system reboot.
A system reboot.
If you look at the data, not the headlines, but the hard data, the budget lines, the deployment logs, Takaichi isn't just winning votes. She is installing a physical firewall.
A physical firewall.
The architect calls this the hard layer.
The hard layer. That sounds ominous.
It's meant to be. It's a concept we need to get comfortable with. We aren't watching a diplomatic shift. We're watching the installation of hardware. Hardware that's meant to deny access to a very specific geographic theater. So the mission of this deep dive, it isn't to analyze her speeches or her drumming technique.
Right.
It's to analyze whether this recalibration is just rhetoric or if the Pacific is actually being locked down. Is this a show or is it a fortress?
Okay, so let's test that theory. You're saying this is a system reboot. If that's true, then the proof has to be in the spending.
It always is.
You always say money talks, but in defense, budget authorizes. So let's look at the FY 2026 defense budget. The cabinet approved $9.04 trillion.
9.04.
That is roughly, what, 58 billion US dollars?
A record high by a significant margin.
It's the 14th year in a row of record highs, but this jump feels different. It's a 9.4% increase over 2025. And the goal is to hit 2% of GDP for defense spending by March 2026.
2 years ahead of schedule.
2 years ahead of the original schedule set back in the Kishida years. For a country that has constitutionally renounced War Article 9 and all that history, this feels, well, it feels aggressive.
It's necessary. But here's the thing. Don't get hung up on the total amount. $58 billion is a lot, sure. But it's less than what the U.S. spends on interest payments.
Good point.
If you just look at that top-line number, you miss the entire strategy. You have to look at what they are buying.
Yeah.
In the bulldozer framework, which is what we're using to analyze this, we look for denial of access assets.
Right.
We aren't looking for parade uniforms or office renovations. We are looking for things that stop ships and planes. And Takaichi is buying exactly that.
You're talking about the Type 03 Kai.
Precisely. The Type 03 Kai or the Chusam upgrade. Now, to the average person listening, a missile battery is a missile battery. But we need to get a little technical for a second to understand why this specific system matters so much.
Okay.
This isn't just a surface-to-air missile for shooting down, I don't know, a stray drone or a slow helicopter. This is a system that is purpose-built to intercept cruise missiles flying at low altitudes.
Okay, explain that distinction. Why is the cruise missile the key target here?
Because that's how a modern war starts. It doesn't start with troops on a beach. It starts with a saturation barrage of hundreds of cruise missiles targeting your airfields, your ports, your power grids. The Type 03 Kai is the shield against that first punch.
And it's been upgraded.
Massively, with new AC radars using gallium nitride amplifiers.
Whoa, hold on. You're getting into the weeds there. Gallium nitride amplifiers. Why does a listener driving to work right now care what the amplifier's made of? Does that actually change the fight?
It changes everything. Everything. Think of an old radar like a standard flashlight. It gets hot, it uses a ton of battery, and the beam is only so bright.
Okay.
Gallium nitride, or GIN, allows a radar to push massive amounts of power through its system without melting the internal components. It means you can see smaller targets, like stealth aircraft or sea-skimming missiles, from much, much further away. It creates a bigger bubble of awareness.
A bigger shield.
But again, the hardware specs, they aren't the whole story. The location is the story.
Yonaguni.
Yonaguni.
For our listeners who don't have a map of the Ryukyu Islands tattooed on their brain, Yonaguni is the westernmost inhabited island of Japan. It's a tiny rock, really.
It is. And do you know how far it is from Taiwan?
It's close.
It is 110 kilometers. That is nothing. On a clear day, you can stand on the shore of Yonaguni and see the central mountain range of Taiwan with your naked eye.
That really puts it in perspective.
It does. So when Takaichi puts a battery of these new Type 03 Kai missiles and the 7th Anti-Ship Missile Regiment with their Type 12s on Yonaguni, she isn't engaging in national defense in the traditional sense.
No?
She is leveraging proximity. She's effectively extending the air defense bubble of Taiwan without technically putting a single Japanese boot on Taiwanese soil.
It's closing that gap. It's covering Taiwan's northern flank.
It's locking the door. If China wants to encircle Taiwan, they have to fly their planes through the Yonaguni Gap. Now, that gap is filled with gallium nitride radars and hunter-killer missiles. It forces the Chinese Air Force to take a massive detour south or fly straight into a kill zone, and it gets worse for the opposition.
Worse how?
Look at the HVGP.
The hypersonic glide projectile. Now, this feels like a step up from defense. This feels offensive.
It is a massive step. Block I is entering service this year, 2026. This is a Japanese-made hypersonic weapon. The range is estimated at 500 to 600 kilometers.
Which means?
Which means for the first time in post-war history, Japanese land-based assets can theoretically strike the Chinese mainland, or to, at the very least, make the entire Taiwan Strait a death trap for any amphibious force trying to cross it.
Let's break down hypersonic for a second. We hear that buzzword a lot. What makes the HVGP so different from a standard missile?
Physics. A standard ballistic missile goes up in a high arc like a fly ball in baseball, and then it comes straight down. It's fast, but it's predictable. You can calculate where it will land from the moment it launches.
Right.
A hypersonic glide vehicle goes up, but then it detaches, and it glides across the top of the atmosphere at Mach 5 or higher. It maneuvers. It zigs and zags.
So you can't predict where it's going to hit.
Exactly. And because it's moving so fast through the atmosphere, it builds up this plasma sheath around it that actually makes it incredibly hard for radar to get a lock on it. It's a defender's nightmare.
So Takaichi buying this.
It isn't signaling, as the diplomats like to say. Hardware creates reality. If you put a hypersonic missile 110 kilometers from a flashpoint, you have changed the physics of the battlefield. You aren't playing goalie anymore.
You have a striker on the field.
You have a striker on the field.
I want to push back on this just a little bit. I see the equipment list. I see the Type 12s, the new system shield for coastal defense, the drone swarms. It's impressive tech, no doubt. But is this sustainable? We know Japan loves high-tech toys. They love robots. They love advanced engineering. Is this just a bunch of shiny hardware to impress the Americans, to show Trump that they are, pulling their weight? Or is it actually operationally viable?
That's the institutional skepticism kicking in. You're asking if this is just performative.
I am. Because buying a Ferrari is one thing. Actually having the fuel and the mechanics and the track to race it in a demolition derby is another.
Fair point. And if it were just F-35s, I might even agree with you. F-35s are great, but they are hangar queens. They need pristine runways, endless maintenance. They're prestige assets.
Right.
But look deeper into the budget. Takaichi is buying ammunition. She is buying hardening materials for bunkers. She's putting electronic warfare units, the 101st and 301st, right there in the island chain.
The unsexy stuff.
The boring stuff. The stuff that actually wins wars. You don't buy boring logistical stockpiles of concrete and spare parts if you're just trying to impress the President of the United States.
No, you buy that stuff if you expect to use it.
Exactly. The architect calls this the hard layer because it is brittle, it is physical, and it is undeniable. You can argue with a speech, you can argue with a press release.
Yeah.
You cannot argue with a hypersonic glide vehicle sitting in a hardened bunker in Miyazaki.
So if the hardware is the lock on the door, let's talk about who else has a key. Because Japan can't do this alone.
No.
They are an archipelago, sure, but they are part of a massive ocean. And Takaichi seems to be hyper-focused on what we might call the regional network.
The logistical OS.
Right, the operating system. We've seen a flurry of diplomacy that goes way beyond the usual photo ops and handshakes, specifically with the Philippines and Australia. Let's start with the Philippines. This relationship has always been complicated.
To put it mildly, I mean, World War II memories run deep there. For a long time, the idea of Japanese troops or even Japanese weapons in the Philippines was a political non-starter.
But fear is a powerful motivator.
It is.
And now we have the RAA, the Reciprocal Access Agreement. It's fully active.
It is active. And strictly speaking, it allows troops to move between countries for training exercises. But you have to look at the hardware transfer. In January of this year, 2026, Japanese-made air surveillance radars were physically delivered to the Philippines.
Why does it matter so much? The Philippines has radars.
They have old radars. And more importantly, they aren't integrated. This delivery connects the sensor picture. Think of it like this. If a Chinese jet takes off from a base in the Spratly Islands, a Japanese-made radar in Luzon now sees it. And that data doesn't just stay in Luzon. It can theoretically be fed in real time into the network, shared with the U.S. and shared with Japan.
That's the whole kill chain concept we hear about.
It creates a unified battle space. It means the Japanese commander sitting in Okinawa can see what the Filipino commander in Luzon sees. It removes the blind spots. And then you look south to Australia.
Right.
In August 2025, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries was selected to upgrade the Australian frigates.
Which is huge. Japan exporting lethal defense technology to a major ally like that. That was unthinkable 10 years ago.
It used to be forbidden. The 3 principles on arms exports basically made it impossible for Japan to sell anything sharper than a butter knife on the international market.
Takaichi and her predecessors have effectively shredded that policy.
They had to. Because now, Japan acts as the core node. By syncing with the Philippines and Australia, they are closing the gaps in the first island chain.
The weak points.
The weak points. Luzon was a weak point. The gap between Taiwan and Okinawa was a weak point. Takaichi is methodically plugging those holes with concrete and steel.
And there's the U.S. component to this as well. The upgrade of U.S. Forces Japan, or USFJ, to a joint force headquarters. Can you explain the significance of that? Because to most people, it just sounds like bureaucratic alphabet soup.
It's crucial. Before, USFJ was basically an admin office. They handled housing, community relations, making sure the lights stayed on at the bases. The real orders, the warfighting orders, came from Hawaii, from Indo-Pakistan.
Which is thousands of miles away and several time zones behind.
Exactly. It creates latency. You've got Honolulu time versus Tokyo time. If a hypersonic missile is inbound, you do not have time to get on the phone with Hawaii.
No.
Now, they are creating a counterpart to the Japanese Joint Operations Command, the JJOC. This means decisions can be made in Tokyo in real time between a U.S. general and a Japanese general sitting in the same room. It cuts the latency. And in hypersonic war, latency is death.
So Japan is positioning itself as the bridge between all these disparate allies.
I wouldn't say a bridge. A bridge is passive. People walk over it. Japan is the anchor.
The anchor.
Without Japan, the chain breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Without Japan's bases and technology, the Philippines is isolated, and Australia is simply too far away to matter in the initial hours of a fight. Takaichi knows this. That's why she's so confident. She holds the keys to the entire American security architecture in the Pacific. She knows she's indispensable.
Okay, so the anchor is dropped. The missiles are in place. The network is being synced. How is the neighborhood reacting to all this? Because you can't park a hypersonic missile aimed in the general direction of Shanghai and expect Beijing to send a fruit basket.
No, Beijing is furious.
Yeah.
But they're also calculated. They're in a real bind here.
The rhetoric has been heated. I mean, Lin Jian, the ministry spokesman, called it a dangerous direction. He said Japan is deviating from the path of peaceful development.
That's standard diplomatic noise. They have a script for this. You could have predicted that statement word for word.
But the actions aren't just noise. We saw carrier exercises near Iwo Jima. That's a first. Two Chinese
in the Pacific. It's designed to show that they can push past the first island chain. It's a flex. But then look at the economic side. We've seen the seafood bans come back.
Right, which always hits the Japanese economy hard. We're talking scallops, sushi-grade fish. That's a massive export industry for them.
It hurts the fishermen in Hokkaido. It hurts the processing plants in the north. We've seen flight cancellations. They are squeezing the tourism industry.
Right, and this is where we need to apply the stress index.
The bulldozer stress index.
Walk us through that again. How do we quantify this rising tension?
The stress index measures the likelihood of a systemic rupture or war. It's a scale of 1 to 10. Right now, on the China-Japan front, the reading is a 6 out of 10.
6 seems manageable. But high, why isn't it an 8 or a 9? We have hypersonics and carriers facing off.
It's what we call Amarillo Intenso, intense yellow. It's not red yet, and here's why. Because while the rhetoric is violent, the physical response from China is actually contained. They see the hard layer forming. They see the Typo 3 Kai in Yonaguni. They see the RAA with the Philippines.
So they're testing it.
They are testing the perimeter with those carrier groups. They are probing. They want to see if Japan flinches.
And has Takaichi flinched?
No. She dissolved the lower house and came back with a supermajority. That is the opposite of flinching. That is doubling down. China is in a very difficult spot here. They are dealing with what the architect calls the Toddy error, that gluttonous ambition. They want Taiwan, but the cost of taking it keeps going up and up every time Takaichi signs another budget authorization.
So the Chinese response is constrained by the fact that the hard layer is actually working. It's deterring them.
It's creating a squeeze. And we have to remember China's own internal situation. They're suffering from what we call autophagy. The system is eating itself.
The economic slowdown?
It's more than a slowdown. The real estate collapse has wiped out the savings of an entire generation of their middle class. Youth unemployment is officially hidden, but unofficially sky high. And their demographic winter is setting in. They're getting old before they get rich.
So they can't afford a hot war.
They can't afford a hot war that drags in Japan and the U.S. from day one. It would shatter what's left of their economy. So they lash out with seafood bans. They lash out with carrier drills. But they don't cross the red line. The stress index sits at 6 because the tension is structural, but the rupture hasn't happened yet. They're waiting.
Waiting for what?
For Japan to crack from the inside.
Which brings us to the internal friction. Because Takaichi isn't an empress. She's a prime minister in a democracy, and democracies have a lot of friction. You mentioned the hard layer, but layers can crack from within.
The SPF 3 factor.
Yeah.
The human element. It's messy.
Exactly. Let's look at Okinawa. February 2026. Massive protests. We're talking tens of thousands of people in the streets of Naha. We've all seen the footage, the signs saying no more bases, the chanting. And this was all triggered by a tragic crime. A former U.S. Marine was implicated in the assault and murder of a local woman.
It's a tragedy. And it's a recurring nightmare for the U.S.-Japan alliance. Every single time something like this happens, it just tears the scab right off that old wound.
The governor of Okinawa is out there leading the protests. This is a PR nightmare for the alliance. It makes that logistical OS you talked about look very fragile if the local population hates the troops hosting the radar.
It is, and statistically, Okinawa is the most anti-base region in the entire country, no question.
And then there's the economy. We cannot ignore the debt. Japan has a debt-to-GDP ratio of over 250%.
The highest in the developed world, by far.
They have an aging population. 29% are elderly. The Social Security bill is eating the budget alive. Can they actually afford to write a $9 trillion check for missiles when they have to pay for pensions and health care?
This is the classic butter versus guns argument. And here's the REALPOLITIK rebuttal, the bulldozer view. Hardware doesn't care about your pension plan.
That's cold. I mean, that sounds great in a war room, but Takaichi has to get elected. If grandmas stop getting their checks, those missiles are going to gather a lot of dust. Is this actually sustainable politically?
It's reality. Look at the Nago election. Nago is the city in Okinawa where the Hanoko base is being built, the single most controversial military project in the entire alliance.
Right.
Despite the protest, despite the tragedy, despite the governor's vocal opposition, the pro-base faction won the mayoral election.
That's true. The incumbent who supported the base construction held onto his seat.
Why? Is it because the economy of Okinawa relies on the base? Maybe. Or maybe it's because the voters there look out at the ocean, see the Chinese carriers sailing by, and decide that the U.S. base is the lesser of two evils.
Hmm.
The bulldozer view is simple. Hardware doesn't resolve demographics. It doesn't fix the birth rate. But the timeline for a missile conflict is now. The timeline for the demographic collapse is 20 years from now. Takaichi is betting that she needs to survive today so she can worry about the pensions later.
She's prioritizing immediate survival over long-term solvency.
Exactly. And those 316 seats, that is her insulation. With his supermajority, she can ignore the noise.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to compromise with the Komeito party anymore. Remember, the Komeito left the coalition because they thought she was too hawkish.
Right, the so-called Peace Party. They walked out in October 2025.
And Takaichi said, fine, leave. And she won a bigger majority anyway. She formed a new coalition with the Ishin, the Japan Innovation Party, who are in some ways even more hawkish than her own party. She has insulated herself from the normal institutional checks and balances. The debt is a problem for future accountants. The missiles are for the current generals.
So she's bought herself time and a huge amount of political capital. But how do we know if this gamble is actually paying off? We need a way to track this. We can't just wait for a war to start to see if the whole strategy worked.
Right, and that's why we use the dashboard, the bulldozer dashboard. We've identified 4 key metrics that we need to watch over the next 6 months, so basically through the end of Q3 2026. If these metrics turn green, the firewall holds.
Yeah.
If they turn red, the system is crashing.
Okay, let's run through them. Metric number 1, what is it?
Installation. It's very simple. We need to verify if the Type 03 Kai is fully operational in Yonaguni by the end of Q2 2026.
Paper versus reality.
Exactly. Announcing a deployment is easy. Any politician can sign a piece of paper. But moving the radar trucks, integrating the power supply, getting the data links up and running, that's the hard part. If we see delays here, it means the bureaucracy is fighting back. It means the soft layer is clogging up the hard layer. If it's there, on time, it means Takaichi's control is absolute.
Okay, makes sense. Metric number 2.
Alignment. Specifically, the Philippines. Do they maintain the RAA alignment despite incredible Chinese pressure?
And we know China is pushing hard on Manila. They're using economic carrots and sticks, threatening to cut off tourism, threatening investment deals.
China is trying to break the chain at its weakest link. If the Philippines starts dragging its feet on the radar integration, or if they start restricting U.S. access to their EDCA bases, then the logistical OS desynchronizes. We need to watch Manila as closely as we watch Tokyo.
Got it. Metric number 3.
Incursions. We need to look at the data from SCSPI, the South China Sea Probing Initiative.
That's the group that tracks the movements of U.S. and Chinese ships and planes. It's all open source intelligence.
Right. And the question is, does the hard layer actually deter? If we see a measurable drop in the frequency of Chinese incursions into the Japanese Air Defense Identification Zone or into the contiguous zone around the Senkaku Islands, then the strategy is working. If the incursions increase, it means China is not impressed. It means they view the wall as penetrable and the stress index goes up.
Okay. And finally, metric number 4.
Budget integrity. We'll check this in December 2026.
That's when the next budget cycle really gets locked in.
Exactly. Can Takaichi maintain that 9 trillion spending level, or does the 250% debt to GDP ratio finally force her to make cuts? Does the Ministry of Finance finally win the battle against the Ministry of Defense? If the budget stays high, the firewall is becoming a permanent feature. If it gets cut, then this was all just a temporary spike driven by election fever.
So to recap the dashboard for everyone, first, installation at Yonaguni. Second, Philippines alignment. Third, SCSPI incursion data. And fourth, the December budget. 3 operational checks, 1 financial check.
If these turn green, the Pacific Firewall is real. The first island chain becomes a fortress.
But let's play the skeptic one last time here. Is this framework flawless? The bulldozer method relies heavily on physical assets and logical actors. But the world isn't always logical.
No model is flawless, no. The metric is very good at capturing the hard layer, but it struggles with the soft layer.
You mean if China changes the game?
Exactly. What if Beijing decides that military pressure is actually counterproductive? What if they switch tactics to a total economic blockade of, say, rare earths? Or a massive cyber offensive that targets the Tokyo Stock Exchange?
Or what if they just wait the Sun Tzu approach?
Wait for the enemy to defeat themselves, yes. If the Japanese economy implodes under the weight of that debt, or if the yen collapses further, say, to 170 or 180 to the dollar, Takaichi might lose her mandate without a single shot being fired.
Right.
Inflation destroys governments much faster than missiles do.
And there's that SPF3 factor again, the irrational human element. If the Japanese public just decides they are tired of inflation, which is driven partly by this weak yen and high spending, they could turn on her supermajority or not.
Never, ever underestimate the ability of a population to reject a sound geopolitical strategy because the price of eggs got too high. That is the ultimate vulnerability of any democracy. The bulldozer can clear the jungle, but it can't force the people to walk down the path you've made.
It really feels like we're watching the gears of history turn in real time. This isn't just about a budget increase or a new missile. It's a shift in the tectonic plates of the Pacific.
We're watching a nation that spent 80 years apologizing for its military strength suddenly decide that strength is the only thing that guarantees survival. It is a massive, massive psychological shift.
And Takaichi is the avatar of that shift, the Iron Lady. Whether you like her politics or not, you cannot deny that she is moving the needle.
She isn't moving the needle. She is breaking the gauge.
We're going to be tracking those 4 metrics very closely on the dashboard. Installation, alignment, incursions, budget, and we encourage you to track them too. Don't just read the headlines. Look for the hardware.
Look for the trucks in Yonaguni.
Exactly. We're going to wrap this up, but before we go, we do have a tease for the next deep dive. We've been throwing around terms like the architect and the bulldozer framework a lot today.
I have.
Well, for the next episode, we are going to try to sit down with the source material itself. We're going to look at the global implications of this, connecting the Pacific Firewall to what's called the Golden Dome in the West.
It's all connected. The missiles in Japan are intrinsically linked to the LNG flows in Europe. You can't understand one without understanding the other.
It's going to be a fascinating conversation. But for today, we'll leave you with this final thought. We've talked about budgets, treaties, and elections. But at the end of the day, what really determines the future of the Pacific?
I'll leave you with the bulldozer's golden rule. Hardware no mente, narrativamente, synchronize ou via junk.
Synchronize or become junk? A cheerful thought to end on. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.